Ready to make a real impact every day? Join the Active Day Home Care team and help clients maintain their independence in the comfort of their own homes. Make a difference in someone's life as you provide essential daily assistance and protect their health and happiness. Earn up to $20 an hour and enjoy additional perks like optional daily pay, 401k, paid time off, ongoing educational training, and more. Join a team that values care, compassion, and your professional growth. Visit ActiveDay.com to apply.
Hi, I'm Richard Karn, and you may have seen me on TV talking about the world's #1 expandable garden hose. Well, the brand new Pocket Hose Copperhead with Pocket Pivot is here, and it's a total game changer. Old-fashioned hoses get kinks and creases at the spigot, but the Copperhead's Pocket Pivot swivels 360 degrees for full water flow and freedom to water with ease all around your home. When you're all done, this rust-proof anti-burst hose shrinks back down to pocket size for effortless handling and tidy storage. Plus, your super light and ultra-durable Pocket Hose Copperhead is backed with a 10-year warranty. What could be better than that? I'll tell you what, an exciting radio-exclusive offer just for you. For a limited time, you can get a free Pocket Pivot and their 10-pattern sprayer with the purchase of any size Copperhead hose. Just text WATER to 64,000. That's WATER to 64,000 for your 2 free gifts with purchase. WATER to 64,000.
By texting 64,000, you agree to receive recurring automated marketing messages from Pocket Hose. Message and data rates may apply. No purchase required. Terms apply. Available at pockethose.com/terms.
VCY America presents Crosstalk, a nationwide call-in program discussing issues that have an effect on our families, our communities, our churches, our nation, and our world. Crosstalk, an opportunity for you to voice your concerns for biblical principles. And now live by satellite and around the world on the internet at vcyamerica.org. Here is today's Crosstalk.
And thank you for joining us today. Ladies and gentlemen, many countries around the world are pointing their fingers at Israel, blaming them for this outbreak of war in the Middle East. But keep in mind that it was Iran, through its proxies, that was first involved in launching this attack against Israel, through Hamas, through Hezbollah, through other Islamic forces. Israel has been under threat for years from Iran, who has pledged to wipe Israel off the face of the earth. And when your enemy says something over and over again, ought you not to take their threat seriously? Earlier today, Israel National News reported the IAF conducted intelligence-based strikes on 12 missile launch sites and storage facilities. These were missiles aimed at Israeli civilians. Iran seeks to shoot at Israeli civilians, while Israel is taking out strategically those institutions that are trying to undo them. Last night, President Trump left the G7 meeting in Canada early to head back to Washington to meet face-to-face with his security advisors. And meanwhile, in our own country, protests continue from those who oppose the rule of law, from those who are seeking to protect criminal aliens. And by the way, what's going on with China? Might they take advantage of these chaotic times to go after Taiwan? Joining us today on these and other critical issues, we welcome back Frank Gaffney. He is president of the Institute for the American Future, president and CEO of Save the Persecuted Christians, vice chairman for Committee on the Present Danger China. He is speaker on the Secure Freedom Minute. He acted as an assistant secretary of defense in the Reagan Pentagon, author of the indictment prosecuting the Chinese Communist Party and Friends for Crimes Against America, China, and the World. Also Sharia, the Threat to America Abridged. Guilty Knowledge, what the U.S. government knows about the vulnerability of the electric grid but refuses to fix, and other titles as well. Frank, welcome back here to Crosstalk.
It's great to be with you. Thank you, Jim, so much for having me back.
So let me first gain your assessment on what's going on right now between Israel and Iran. Israel's prime minister has long said that Iran must not have nuclear weapons capability, said he would act before such a horrendous thought would turn to reality. You were previous Assistant Secretary of Defense during the Reagan administration. So comment through your eyes on what's taking place here today.
Jim, thank you. There's so many points to be made here. I'd like, though, if I may, before getting to your specific question, to just touch on something you spoke about at the outset. Israel has, in fact, been explicitly threatened with death by the Iranian regime since it came to power in 1979, 46 years ago. You're absolutely right. when your enemy tells you what they're going to do to you, and not just, when their regime commenced, but every day, like a mantra, you must heed that warning. And that applies to us, too, because right after the mullahs and their followers have said death to Israel, they have always said death to America. So this problem, to come to your question, is, of course, now playing out in real time in Israel, in Iran, and in the region, particularly the overflights that are taking place in neighboring countries of the two states. But it's happening with the stakes being very much global in character, not just for Israel, not just for Iran, not just for the people of Iran in particular, Jim, because there is a prospect, and I think it's a more realizable prospect every single day, that the 90 or so million Iranians may finally get their freedom after those horrible 46 years in which they've been brutalized, tortured, many of them murdered by this regime. And that's the amazing thing about this, is it has not only threatened death to Israel and death to America, it has brought death and mass privation to its own people.
Yeah. And I believe, we've got to awaken to the fact, as you pointed out, death to Israel, death to America, that they have viewed Israel as being the little Satan, but the target, the big Satan, is the United States. I mean, this really ought to be a wake-up call to our own nation.
Yeah. Well, it's more than a wake-up call. It's an answer to prayer for our nation, I believe, that Israel, and you touched on it in your comments, it's not just Benjamin Netanyahu, who has been saying for years that Israel must act to ensure that Iran does not get the bomb. Every American president since the mullahs came to office has said more or less the same thing. But only Israel, and only under Bibi Netanyahu, has actually had the courage, as well as the will and the amazing wherewithal to do what needs to be done to prevent that bomb from falling into the hands of the most dangerous regime, arguably, on the planet.
Frank, yesterday you voiced a commentary that Israel must finish the job this time. Tell us what you mean by finish the job, and what has prevented Israel from doing this previous?
I think that's actually a term that Donald Trump has used in the context, if I'm not mistaken, of Gaza, encouraging Israel to finish the job there, which means finish off the enemy, finish off, in that case, Hamas. But Hamas is, of course, like Hezbollah and like the Houthis and, well, frankly, other terrorist organizations around the world, including here in the United States, all essentially, projects of these mullahs in Iran. When we talk about finishing the job in Iran, I believe it must be finishing the mullahs, not just, taking down their nuclear weapons enterprise. Bad as that is, let's just say for the purpose of discussion that it were completely shut down. You would still have, if you don't get rid of the mullahs and their security apparatus that keeps them in power, despite, the determination of the people of Iran to liberate themselves if they can. You have, I believe, a situation in which you would see the Iranian regime continuing to foster terrorism all over the world. And again, Jim, as I said, including here in our own country, with mosques and front groups and even assassination squads now here and seeking to bring what? Death to America.
Right.
So you've got to get rid of the regime if you are to finish the job, and everything else gets a lot easier, I think, if that's done.
Do you believe that we are getting a certain sound from President Trump? Sometimes it's been difficult to sort out at various times from the media and various media accounts that some have stated that the president has stopped Israel's prime minister from taking out, the Ayatollah Khomeini. But yet President Trump appears open to having this happen. He's been encouraging Iran to come to the negotiating table, yet he says we want a real end to the Iran threat, not a ceasefire. Comment on the Trump administration. They're acting on this, and we are seeing a total different response than what we would see under a Biden administration.
Oh, that's for sure. The Biden administration was doing everything they could to prevent Israel from taking on and taking down that nuclear enterprise, let alone removing the regime from power. They wouldn't be doing anything remotely like what President Trump is doing. And as to your question about his policy, I think it's been evolving, frankly. I don't know whether to credit the line that, he was actually conspiring with Benjamin Netanyahu, in the best sense of the word, in this case, to create the impression on the part of the Iranians that they were home free because the president was insistent on negotiations and was checking Israel from acting as long as they were going on, which, of course, incentivized the mullahs to just do what they did fabulously well for decades, namely string along these naive and generally, foolish American administrations of both parties. My point is this, that I think that the president has, in the course of the time since Israel began attacking Iranian assets on the 61st day after President Trump said he would give them 60 days to effect a negotiated deal with respect to their nuclear weapons program. The president, I think, was, whether he was actively involved in a conspiracy to get this done to surprise the Iranians or not, I think he was favorably disposed, even though he said, he was hoping that he'd be able to get a deal. He was not ill-disposed by any means to Israel taking action. And I think in the subsequent days, as Israel has more and more and more successfully taken control of the airspace over Iran, for example, and neutralized large numbers of these ballistic missiles and taken down a number of nuclear sites, as well as taking out quite a number of the Iranian military and intelligence and Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps security leadership. Not Khamenei himself so far, though there are reports that he might have been wounded in an attack, but that may remain to be done. But the main thing is, I think today, and this is really the critical point as we're speaking, that I believe President Trump is very much aligned with Israel on the need to finish the job, and I praise God for that.
Yeah, and on that line here, Frank, I believe it's really important that believers across this nation are praying for this situation, praying for President
Amen.
Trump and for advisors that would lead him in the right direction, and for the Prime Minister in making the right decisions here.
Amen. You're so right. Look, this is a God thing, as I see it. The fact that Israel has accomplished what it has is nothing short of miraculous. I don't take anything away from the skill of the Israelis and their creativity and so on, but still, and I think they would say the same, that this is a miracle. And it will be miraculous if now they are successful, perhaps with our help, at the very least with our acquiescence, in doing what they've been consistently denied, and this goes really back to your first question, consistently denied the ability to, finish the job in the past.
Right.
Going back to 1948 or 1956 or 1967 or 1973, the Lebanon war. mean, successive times, one administration or another has told the Israelis, stop, you've done enough, give it a break.
Friends, we're going to take a quick break. Frank Gaffney with us here today on Crosstalk and talking about the intensification here of world tensions and looking specifically right now at the Middle East. But we'll also be taking a look at what's happening on American soil as well. We'll be back in 1 minute. You're listening to Crosstalk on the VCY America Network.
Back to Genesis with Dr. John Morris, scientist and creation researcher with the Institute for Creation Research. Dr. Morris, when we're looking at the evolutionary scale, what animals would be considered primitive?
Chris, mammals are thought to be more advanced on the evolutionary scale, although all animals are amazingly well designed. Insects are thought to be rather primitive, but research has shown that even butterflies, as they migrate across the ocean, have some sort of built-in magnetic sense which keeps them on course. They can correct their course even if blown off course by wind. Chris, even insects were created by an amazingly intelligent creator. There's nothing primitive about any form of life. Even single-cell life is complex. If it's living, it's complex. And it's been that way ever since back in Genesis.
If you'd like to go back to Genesis, you can find us on the web at www.icr.org. For the Institute for Creation Research, I'm Chris O'Brien. Thanks for tuning in.
You're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. With us today is Frank Gaffney, president of the Institute for the American Future. Certainly talking about the global tensions that are on the increase here, and we're watching right in real time this war before us here with Israel having a preemptive strike against Iran. And keep in mind, friends, that Iran has not only warned Israel and threatened Israel, but has threatened the United States as well. Frank, before we continue, give us a website. You've got actually several sites that keep our listeners informed on critical issues. So tell us about, give us a word here about the Institute for the American Future.
Ready to make a real impact every day? Join the Active Day Home Care team and help clients maintain their independence in the comfort of their own homes. Make a difference in someone's life as you provide essential daily assistance and protect their health and happiness. Earn up to $20 an hour and enjoy additional perks like optional daily pay, 401k, paid time off, ongoing educational training, and more. Join a team that values care, compassion, and your professional growth. Visit activeday.com to apply.
With pleasure. Let me just say before I do how much I appreciate our partnership with VCY. It's a terrific network, and you've been very, very generous in allowing us to enrich, I hope, your content with your audience, and that's made possible by this Institute for the American Future. It's kind of an umbrella organization, Jim, that supports the work of 5 different coalitions. And these are all, informal sort of pickup teams, I call them, of very expert people. I think of it as the special forces in the war of ideas. And by that I mean, they're sort of self-selecting but also specialized in various aspects of a given problem set. We have one we call the Committee on the Present Danger China, which of course is aimed at trying to take down the Chinese Communist Party. We have another we call the Sovereignty Coalition, which is designed to protect our sovereignty and keep the so-called, I call them godless globalists worldwide, from creating world government at the expense of our freedom and sovereignty. Third is one we call the Victory Coalition, which is very much relevant to the topic we just discussed. In fact, we had a fantastic emergency briefing yesterday on this same topic we've been covering, the war, the multi-front war Israel's in at the moment. And people can find that at victoryco.org. That's all about the Sharia supremacists and what they're trying to do to us. A fourth deals with America's military. We want to make America's military great again. So we call that Save America's Military, and that's saveamericasmilitary.org. I should have mentioned the Present Danger China is presentdangerchina.org, and the website for the Sovereignty Coalition is just sovereigntycoalition.org. And then finally, one that I know is very much on your heart, as mine. I think it was kind of the manifestation of something that is overarching all of the things that we've just talked about, the spiritual war in which we find ourselves at the moment. And that manifestation is the persecution globally, by some estimates, of some 365 million Christians. And that's according to one of our partners in this Save the Persecuted Christian Coalition, Open Doors USA. 365 million Christians. And those are heavily persecuted, by the way. It's not just people who have a bad day for their faith. These are people who are dying for it, or being tortured, or being deprived of their homes, and what have you. And we have a wonderful pickup team, as I say, in our Save the Persecuted Christians Coalition, made up of outfits like Open Doors, by the way, that are doing wonderful work, as you know, and I know you've covered them, in helping relieve the suffering. Our job is a little different. We want to hold those who are persecuting Christians accountable and punish them for doing so. So you create a disincentive to this behavior rather than have it be really basically all upside.
And friends, again, the Gateway website would be usfuture.org, usfuture.org. Frank, we know that Iran has enrichment facilities that are underground. We're told that only the U.S. has large enough bombs to decimate these facilities. Many are looking, will the U.S. get involved with this or not? If we do, if U.S. provides these, would it not thrust the U.S. into full-fledged war at this time?
I think it would, yes. I'm not personally in favor of doing that. I don't think it's necessary. Newt Gingrich had an interesting post, I think, on X today about why you really don't need B-2 bombers with the mother of all bombs going up against, for example, the facility at Fordow, which is buried by some estimates half a kilometer underground. A very hard target indeed. He says, and I think he's exactly right, help bring down the regime, and Fordow will fall with a new government. I'm quite convinced. And that's, it seems to me, a far better way. The Israelis, to my knowledge, are not asking for our direct intervention in offensive operations, nor should they. And I think if we can accomplish the mission, and more to the point, Jim, going back to the very first question you asked, if we can create, through a decisive victory by Israel, which we help bring about by defending them, by providing material assistance, providing intelligence and the like, but not necessarily offensive force involvement, I think we alter the Middle East beyond recognition. I think we find an opportunity for stability and for security for Israel, and for security, for that matter, for all the other nations in the world, or that part of the world, I should say, that have been threatened by the Iranians. That includes the Saudis, that includes UAE and Kuwait, and Bahrain, and so on. And I think that is very much to be sought. And I just can't thank God enough. It's in prospect, I believe, at the moment.
Let's also bring Russia-Ukraine into this. I saw Ukraine's President Zelensky not happy that the U.S. took some 20,000 missiles that they were expecting and instead had those go to the Middle East. He was anticipating having those weapons or those missiles for his use there. And then we also have this whole matter with Russia as well, and really China. We're going to bring them into the picture too, because they have ordered their citizens to leave Israel using the land border crossings. Your perspectives on Russia, Ukraine? Is there concern that either of them might intervene for Iran or provide them weaponry and materials as well?
Well, that's an ever-present concern, of course. I don't think that's in the cards at the moment. I think the beauty of what Israel has done is they have so decisively acted that it's very late in the game for the Russians and Chinese to be involved. It's not to say it won't happen, but I think at the moment they're staying out. But let me just say this about Ukraine and for that matter, the Middle East. These are two, I think of them as acts of strategic arson by the Communist Party's leader, Deng Xiaoping. Xi Jinping. Deng is a predecessor of his. Xi is the current general secretary, as they call him, of the Chinese Communist Party. And I think what he has done, both by greenlighting Russia's invasion of Ukraine, right after, by the way, the Olympics were over in Beijing, and greenlighting Iran's attack through Hezbollah, to some extent through Hamas principally, and then, of course, the Houthis, was to create conditions under which we were distracted and tied down and bled dry in terms of both money and not least our arsenal, to the point where we would be less capable of interfering with the Chinese act of aggression in the Pacific, notably and possibly not exclusively aimed at Taiwan. So I call it World War Xi, not World War III, World War Xi. And I think that nothing could do more to help deter that from going kinetic, as they say, turning into a shooting war in Asia and the Pacific, than the decisive defeat of China's principal ally in the Middle East, namely the Iranian regime.
Yesterday, we saw the redirection of the USS Nimitz from the South China Sea to start heading toward the Middle East. Do you believe that this move might compromise the stabilization there? I mean, would this open the door for China to further threaten Taiwan or even make an invasion of Taiwan with the Nimitz being redirected?
It might have that effect. I think that more deterrent capability in the region generally is better. I'm not quite sure why the Nimitz is being moved. Obviously, there's a desire, as is being evidenced in, I think, B-2s being forward deployed, maybe some B-52s as well. Certainly, there seem to be a lot of aerial refueling tankers headed to the region, and that all quite possibly means that President Trump will order military action against Iran. But at the very least, I think this larger point that I'm making, if Xi is trying to calculate that we're going to be tied down, we're going to be distracted, we're going to be otherwise disabled from doing material harm to his acts of aggression in the Far East, I think that will prove, if wrong, a disincentive to him to act, whether the Nimitz is in place or not, or another carrier battle group. We need to do something of an epic strategic character, and I think taking Iran off the chessboard, not least curbing Chinese access to way below market priced oil and natural gas, is going to put the Chinese back on their heels. And you know, one of the interesting things about this, my friend Steve Bannon likes to use the term La Beijing to describe the people of China. He makes a distinction between them and the regime that misrules them and threatens us. Does that sound familiar? Well, it's pretty much the same thing as their ally, Iran. And I'm saying we need, in both the case of Iran and in China, to be helping the Lao Beijing in those countries, the ordinary people. The people have been so badly oppressed and brutalized. In the case of China, by some estimates, 100 million of them have been killed by the Chinese regime. And that doesn't even take into account 400 to 500 million babies in utero who were murdered through their one-child policy.
Yes.
But my point is this: if we're attending to both of those people, if we're speaking to them, if we're making clear we have no fight with them, we want them to be liberated, we may actually see coming out of this Iran exercise not just the fall of one horrific axis of evil member in Iran, but also perhaps that one in China as well.
Otherwise known as the red-green axis. We'll be back. You will be back in just 1 minute here, friends, on Crosstalk. Right after the break, we're going to certainly also focus what's happening within these United States as well. We have seen open borders through the Biden administration and now havoc across this nation as a result, and as predicted as well. We'll be back in 1 minute on Crosstalk here on the VCY America Network.
Have you ever had someone attempt to talk to you about the Watchtower Society or the Book of Mormon? Or perhaps a friend has told you that they've started yoga and invited you to participate. You know you heard something about these religions and teachings, but never had the material in your hand to give a biblical response to their teachings. Now you can. Two world-renowned researchers, Dr. Ron Carlson and Ed Decker, teamed up to write Fast Facts on False Teachings, an easy-to-use resource guide that gives you quick, clear facts about several cults and false teachings. You'll find chapters on atheism, Freemasonry, Hinduism and yoga, Islam, Jehovah's Witnesses, Mormonism, and much more. Fast Facts on False Teachings is available for a donation of $18 or more when you call VCY America, 1-800-729-9829. That's 1-800-729-9829.
Frank Gaffney with us here today on Crosstalk, and friends, his commentaries airing both over VCY Radio. We're privileged also to carry him on WVCY Television and VCY.TV a couple hours every week as well, and keeping you informed on many, many matters across this nation, really focusing on security and having a secure nation, a Secure Freedom Minute you hear on radio. I'd like to talk with you. And by the way, friends, that you can reach more information on Frank, his organizations that he's engaged with, usfuture.org, usfuture.org. So, Frank, let's turn our attention to domestic situations here as well. We have seen riotal uprisings continue in Los Angeles. We have witnessed the destruction of property, physical opposition to law enforcement and federal agents. Looting has been rampant. These No Kings rallies were staged around the country this past Saturday. First of all, do we know who or what is orchestrating these and funding these disruptive efforts?
Well, following the money is always a good idea, Jim, when you're trying to unravel what is actually going on here. And there are indications that what we're witnessing is a result of cash infusions by cutouts for the Chinese Communist Party. There's a guy out of Singapore by the name of Singham, as I recall, who is a billionaire, made his fortune in dealing with the Chinese, and has been a very aggressive promoter of its propaganda. His funds apparently are part of what has gone into this. There's also a gal, as I recall, by the name of Christy Walton, one of the heirs to the Walmart fortune, who has been a big funder of the programs gone under the banner of No Kings, brought to us by a group of Marxists who run an outfit called Indivisible. And the Marxists, when I say that, I don't mean, in a sort of euphemistic way. I'm talking about people who actually embrace Marxism. And when you understand that the wellspring of that in our time, formerly the Chinese, were one of the spin-offs of the Soviet communist enterprise, but it's gone, and the Chinese have taken over international communism. And it's very much active here. Some of it brought to us by front groups like the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, which spawned Black Lives Matter. You have the Chinese Progressive Association, which directly works with, and I think to some extent even out of, the Chinese consulate. You may remember in the so-called Summer of Love, Mike Pompeo, then the Secretary of State, shut down the Houston consulate of the Chinese Communist Party because it was helping organize and mount the insurrections of that period, 2020. So we're dealing with a very aggressive effort by a mortal enemy of this country. They make no bones about it. They seek our destruction. They say that every day, even in English, in their propaganda outlets. And I think you were telling me off air that the latest news item on this is that the FBI director, Kash Patel, has just revealed, surprise, surprise, that there is evidence that the Chinese were directly involved in trying to influence that 2020 election in another way, by actually printing up fraudulent ballots.
Right.
I mean, you can't make this stuff up. And Jim, just a quick, an important point. The Chinese, going back, I mentioned Deng Xiaoping, going back to his day, declared, he in person declared that the Cold War between the Soviet Union and the United States was over. The Soviets had lost. A new Cold War was beginning. This is 1992. Between the United States and China would win. And what he set about doing was something he called the hide and bide strategy, for bringing that about through a technique that a couple of colonels in the People's Liberation Army in 1999 actually published, describing the plan. It was unrestricted warfare. So what we've been witnessing, whether it's election interference, whether it's using the United Front Work Department and these various front groups, whether it's, color revolutions in places like Los Angeles and perhaps elsewhere across the country, thus far, No Kings has been, I think, mostly, if not entirely, nonviolent, thank God. But could it go worse? Yes, it can. And that would be part and parcel of the unrestricted warfare that we've been subjected to now for decades by the Chinese, and they've largely gotten away with it.
Yeah, some of these things are just off the charts, too. I mean, I'm looking at a story that came out yesterday from WND.com, in which the Center Square, they were quoting from the Center Square, calling for the resignation of a North Carolina lawmaker, Democratic Representative Julie Von Hafen of Wake County. And on social media, she's accused of posting an image of a woman holding a signage with the image of a bloody used guillotine. And in the words, "In these difficult times, some cuts may be necessary." And a prop on one end of the handle represented a beheaded Donald Trump. And of course, she was called out on this. She now brought down the photo, but she said, "Let me be clear. I condemn political violence in all forms. My focus remains on bringing people together and fighting for the values that matter to North Carolinians." But yeah, caught
Forgive me for laughing.
Indeed.
Absolutely hilarious.
Caught red-handed and say, here she is promoting violence, and then saying, "Well, I am not promoting violence of any kind." But beheading of the president of the United States. I mean, it's outrageous what she's done.
Well, and I think the truth of the matter is, it's just exposing what a lot of the people who are associated with. Not everybody. I'm sure
right.
There were some 5 million people, attending one or the other of these rallies. I'm sure the vast majority of them are authentically peaceful protesters. But there is a core, and unfortunately the core is running the show, that are perfectly prepared to use violence if they could get away with it, much as we saw in 2020. Sleeper
cells, is that a concern, Frank?
Sleeper cells is a huge concern. And let me just tell you the one that worries me most, though I am very, very mindful, as we speak particularly, that you have Hezbollah cells in our country and other Iranian operations. You have Muslim Brotherhood cells in our country. And their numbers have been swollen, by the way, by the open border you spoke of just before our last break.
Right.
By design. Not just predictably, but by design, intended to allow such people to get into our country and, yes, do harm to it. But the ones that worry me most, the ones that have come across that border by some estimates, the southern border in particular, to the tune of anywhere between 10,000 and maybe as many as 150,000 People's Liberation Army soldiers who have now gotten inside our wire, inside our country. We know not their whereabouts. We don't know what they're up to, but there's every reason to believe that those sleeper cells will be activated in the event China does decide to go to war, with possibly catastrophic effects inside our country.
Mm-hmm. And it's not only the sleeper cells, but it's also these sanctuary states as well. I mean, we've got blue states that are doing all they can to destroy us, in my opinion, from within. And I'm thinking of a story that was just published last night from the New York Post that reported that the State Attorney General of New York, Letitia James, conducting a misconduct probe now of New York local law enforcement that's helping the Trump administration crack down on illegal immigration. I mean, she's actually demanding that the sheriff of Oswego County turn over any documents about ICE detainer requests and detention and apprehension of people who have allegedly violated immigration laws. I mean, when you have the state's top cop, so to speak, working hand in hand with those who are here to do, cause disruption to our system of government, it's not only sleeper cells, but we've got, activists like this as well that, in my opinion, are a great concern.
Well, you're absolutely right. And going back to the question you asked earlier about following the money,
mm-hmm.
George Soros has made such people, in her case in particular, but others as well, attorneys general or district attorneys, people who are actually working for the other side,
mm-hmm.
people who are seeking, not only in her case, to prosecute and, if possible, imprison Donald Trump when he was about to run for president again, but also doing everything in their power to help and protect and otherwise facilitate the, let me put a fine point on it, the subversive behavior of these sorts of agitators, as distinguished from, peaceful protesters and so on. But the agitators who are set in keeping with the Marxist agenda to take down our country, our government, and our Constitution.
Friends, you're listening to Crosstalk on VCY America. I'm going to open our phone lines. Our number 800-733-9829. If you have a question you'd like to ask of our guest today or a brief comment, 1-800-733-9829. Frank, President Trump is considering adding some 36 countries now to the U.S. travel ban that would be added to the 12 countries already under the ban. What's your perspective on that? Is that a positive step forward?
Well, it obviously will be very disruptive for trade and tourism and other things. But I think what is animating the president is a bona fide concern about having people inside this country who wish to do us harm.
Mm-hmm.
And again, I pray that there will be a more concerted effort made on the ones that are already here. But he's clearly trying to close the barn door before more get in. But could I just mention one point on this, because we're giving people a lot of bad news, and I don't want to sugarcoat things, but I do want to say, where possible, there are things that we can do about some of these problems. And just to give you an example, as you recall, 5 or 6 months ago, I guess now, United Healthcare Associates executive was gunned down in the streets of New York City.
Mm-hmm.
A man was, after a time, apprehended has now been put on trial for his murder. That individual, Jim, as you probably know, was not caught as a result of surveillance cameras, of which there are plenty in Manhattan, nor by law enforcement, with all of its, capabilities at every level that were applied to this, fugitive being brought to justice. He was caught because a guy flipping burgers in an Altoona, Pennsylvania McDonald's had the wit to connect between the image that he saw, I think, on television in a wanted thing, to the guy who was sitting eating a burger in his restaurant.
Yeah.
That's the kind of crowdsourcing opportunity that we need to bring to bear against these immigrants that are a very real risk here.
Frank Gaffney with us today, usfuture.org. We'll quick take a break here on Crosstalk and then come back to your phone calls. The number 800-733-9829, 800-733-9829. Back in a minute.
For the Worldview Report, I'm Brandon House. Our website's worldviewtube.com. Our reporter, Annie Cyrus, who was born and raised in Iran, now lives in the U.S., is reporting something she saw as she monitors Iranian television. Shortly after Israel hit one of the state TV studios in Iran, all of a sudden, the phrase Islamic Republic quietly disappeared from the crawler on the bottom of the screen. In its place was Armed Forces Iran and Iran's broadcast. The words Islamic Republic simply vanished, but the double spaces remained. In other words, they're not announcing it, they're not admitting it, but they apparently are erasing it live and in plain sight. Does Israel and the freedom fighters in Iran now have control of that state TV department? We'll keep you posted as the Middle East is shaking up and the stage is set for Bible prophecy. I'm Brandon House.
This is Crosstalk on VCY America. Frank Gaffney with us today on the broadcast, the website usfuture.org. And let's go right to the phone lines today on the program. We're going to begin with Roger in Marble, Minnesota. And Roger, you're on the air.
Thank you for taking my call. I had heard somewhere, and I don't remember where, but I had heard that the Black Lives Matter riots in Minneapolis in particular, because of Tim Walz's strong ties to China, that there were Chinese backing that and involved in that to instigate or whatever the case may be. Have you heard anything about that?
I can't prove that, but what we do know is that one of the leaders of Black Lives Matter announced that she and one of her colleagues were trained Marxists. And as I mentioned earlier, the Freedom Road Socialist Organization, which has very clear ties to China, is, I think, the impetus behind Black Lives Matter. So it may be 2 degrees of separation, but I think that the connections can be made there, yes.
Thank you, Roger, for the call. We're going next to Terry in Stanford, Kentucky. Terry, you're on the air.
Yes, he was talking about the rise of China in '92. A great book titled The Year of the Rat by Timberlake documents what Clinton gave the Chinese beginning. My understanding was they basically financed both of his presidential campaigns, but I would say that goes back beyond Waltz, maybe back to Clinton, the wonderful Jesuit from Georgetown University. And the other thing I'd ask you to comment on, is it constitutional that a Marxist or a communist could actually hold office, federal office? Would that not be unconstitutional? I appreciate your conversation.
Great.
Appreciate you being there.
Thank you, Terry. Frank.
Terry, thank you. I'm a graduate of Georgetown myself, and let me just tell you, Bill Clinton was no Jesuit. He may have had some training by them, but not took on the oath. Bill Clinton's second campaign, for sure, was financed by the Chinese Communist Party. I believe they paid him handsomely for getting into the World Trade Organization, which he helped engineer. I don't know about the first. It wouldn't surprise me, but I don't know if the evidence is there to support that. But there's unquestionably no more serious single act of enabling the Chinese Communist Party's ambitions to be realized, ambitions to destroy this country by becoming not only capable of this unrestricted warfare against us, but ultimately of being able to use old-fashioned military violence against us, than that accession to the WTO. By the way, they've violated all of their obligations in the WTO. They've just completely weaponized it against us. I think the only actual bar to a Chinese or other kind of communists from serving in office would be that they would have to lie in pledging an oath to support and defend the Constitution. Yeah. And I'd like to see people prosecuted for that. In fact, Jim, I've got a book, I think you may have mentioned it at the outset, it's called The Indictment, prosecuting the Chinese Communist Party and friends for crimes against America, China, and the world. And it's those friends, of which, I mean, that's literally what the Chinese call them. They're friends on Wall Street, they're friends in academia, they're friends in the media, they're friends in Hollywood, they're friends in government. These are people who are working for the CCP, and I think they have to be held accountable for doing so. It's betrayal of our country, in some cases at least, if not writ large. And I am particularly concerned about Wall Street sending our money, the money in our pension funds, the money in our mutual funds, and so on, to Communist China, a fair amount of which is going directly into Chinese military company. There's a deal that was just done by Jamie Dimon's, J.P. Morgan, and Brian Moynihan's Bank of America to help a company that is making Chinese submarines more lethal against our fleet get $4.7 billion from American and other investors. It's a company called CATL, C-A-T-L. It's outrageous. It's a betrayal, and they should be prosecuted for it, in my estimation.
Terry, thank you for your call. William is next in Milwaukee. William, you're on the air.
Yes, hi. I'm calling because I'm understanding that there seems to be the trail goes all the way to like attorneys generals. That apparently it sounds like you're saying it's a known fact. Why isn't something being done? I don't understand this. What does Trump have to do? Can he do anything?
Okay, thank you, Frank.
Well, Trump has a lot of things going on at the moment, but yes, he could be doing more about this. Let me just give you one example. On the 21st of February of this year, as one of his first acts in office, he established what he called the America First investment policy. And that basically said we're going to stop putting our pension funds and so on money into Chinese companies. He also said we're going to stop allowing them to invest in this country in ways that are dangerous, like, you know, buying up farmland adjacent to military assets. Unfortunately, the president has not yet enforced that policy initiative. I think that's something he could do, and I think it would make a very material difference in the state of our country at the moment, and the ability of the Chinese to think that they can have their way with us.
Appreciate the call. We're down to just a minute. Jerry, do you have a quick question from Racine?
It's basically a comment. We just need to, as Christians, choose a side. I know that a lot of people like Tucker and a lot, I don't want to keep saying names, but they're like the ever-growing unaffiliated. But there's only three sides here, and you're going to be on the right side or the wrong side. And we at least need to be, if we're going to defend any country on either side of the big pond, Atlantic or Pacific, Israel is one of them. I mean, defensively, obviously. And then... I
tell you what, I'm going to have to stop you there to get a fast comment here from our guest. Frank, 30 seconds.
I'll take 5.
Okay.
Amen.
Okay. Very good. Thank you for the call. We are out of time on the broadcast here today. Our guest, Frank Gaffney, president of the Institute for the American Future, and friends, again, the Gateway website there, usfuture.org, usfuture.org. And again, we encourage you to be in fervent prayer for our nation, for our president, for advisors, for his cabinet, for the Security Council, and certainly be praying for peace, be praying for Israel through this time as well. Frank, thank you so much for joining us.
God bless you, Jim. It's my privilege.
Again, that's Frank Gaffney, usfuture.org. Friends, thanks for tuning in daily here on Crosstalk. Lord willing, Chris Katolka from the Friends of Israel Gospel Ministry with us tomorrow, followed by Usama Dakdak the following day. God bless you. Thanks for listening.
You've been listening to Crosstalk via satellite and the internet from VCY America. Views expressed may or may not be those of this station. For a CD of today's program, send a donation of $6 or more to VCY Tape Ministry, 3434 West Kilbourne Avenue, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, 53208, or download by RSS or podcast from crosstalkamerica.com. And join us again for Crosstalk.